Subscribe to Storylab. Now, let's begin this one. The December wind cut through the Montana pines as Grant Green watched 6 executives stumble through the snow, their breath forming clouds in the thin mountain air. For 3 days, he'd been teaching them how to survive when everything went wrong. How to make fire with wet wood. How to find water in winter. How to think clearly when panic wanted to take over. Grant stood 6'2", lean and weathered at 38, with the kind of quiet presence that made people listen when he spoke. His company, Crucible Training Solutions, had been running for 5 years now, teaching corporate types the skills he'd learned in a different life. A harder life, before Marie and Charlie gave him a reason to walk away from the shadows. "Mr. Green," Brad Briggs called out, the youngest of his instructors, jogging through the snow. "We've got good progress on the shelter construction. Tim and Antonio are running the fire starting drills." Grant nodded. Brad was 26, former Army Ranger, hungry to prove himself. Good kid. All 6 of his instructors were solid men he'd vetted carefully. Men who understood that what they taught could save lives. His satellite phone buzzed in his jacket. Grant pulled it out, frowning. Marie knew he was off-grid until Thursday. She wouldn't call unless, "Daddy." Charlie's voice hit him like a punch to the gut. His 6-year-old son was screaming, the kind of terror no child should ever know. "Daddy, Mommy's bleeding. They shot her. There's men with guns and Mommy told me to hide in the closet and call you, but they're looking for me and—" "Charlie, listen to me." Grant's training kicked in, his voice steady even as ice flooded his veins. "Where are you exactly?" "In your closet, behind the shoe boxes like Mommy showed me, but Daddy, she's not moving and there's so much." "Stay there. Don't make a sound. I'm calling help right now." Grant pulled out his personal cell, dialed 911 with shaking fingers. The operator answered on the second ring. "My wife's been shot. 2847 Willowbrook Lane, Seattle. My son is hiding in the house. There are armed intruders." The line went dead. Not just quiet, dead. Grant looked at the screen. No signal. Impossible, he'd hit full bars 2 seconds ago. He switched back to the satellite phone. "Charlie? Charlie." Static. Then nothing. Grant's mind raced through the possibilities in under 3 seconds. Coordinated attack. Signal jamming. They wanted Marie dead. Knew exactly when he'd be out of reach. Which meant they'd been watching his family for weeks. Maybe months. And 9 hours away, his 6-year-old son was hiding in a closet while men with guns searched for him. Brad was staring at him, reading the shift in Grant's expression. "What happened?" "My family's under attack." Grant was already moving, pulling his go bag from the equipment tent. Inside, cash, fake IDs he'd sworn he'd never use again. A Glock 19 he'd promised Marie he'd gotten rid of. Ammunition, and a flip phone with a number he'd memorized but never called. "I need to borrow the Suburban. Now." "I'm coming with you." Brad didn't make it a question. "You stay here. Keep these executives alive and finish the course." "That's an order." But Tim Bautista was already grabbing his gear, his scarred hands moving with practiced efficiency. The former Marine had never said much about his past, but Grant had seen the look in his eyes, the look of a man who'd lost people because he wasn't there. "No offense, boss, but screw that. Your family's hit, you don't go in alone." Antonio Collier emerged from the tree line, his dark eyes sharp. "What's the situation?" Within 5 minutes, the choice was made for him. Brad, Tim, Antonio, Ron Banks, Stephen Cohen, and Garrett Kirby, all 6 of them loading into 2 vehicles. The executives left with emergency beacons and coordinates for the nearest ranger station. Grant didn't argue. He couldn't afford to. As they descended the mountain road, he made calls on the flip phone to people who existed in databases under different names. People who owed him. People who could tell him what 9 armed men wanted with a former intelligence operative who'd been ghost for 5 years. The first callback came an hour into the drive. "This is about Damascus." The voice was distorted, filtered through enough encryption to be unrecognizable. "Dwayne Powers. He's been promoted. Deputy Director of Operations now, and he's cleaning house." Grant's hands tightened on the wheel. Damascus. The operation that had ended his career in intelligence. 7 years ago, he'd been part of a joint task force investigating arms trafficking in Syria. What they found instead was a network of American officials, including mid-level CIA officer Dwayne Powers, selling weapons and intelligence to the highest bidder. Grant had gathered evidence, prepared to go to Congress. Then his entire team had been ambushed, 4 dead. Grant barely escaped. He tried the official channels, filed reports, testified in closed sessions. Nothing happened. Powers had friends in high places, and the investigation quietly disappeared. Grant was offered a choice: take early retirement with full benefits and keep his mouth shut, or face charges for mishandling classified information, charges they'd manufacture if needed. He'd taken the retirement, met Marie 3 months later at a coffee shop in Seattle. She was a pediatric nurse, warm and bright, and everything the dark world he'd left behind wasn't. They'd married within a year. Charlie came along 2 years after that. Grant had thought he'd buried the past deep enough. Apparently, Powers disagreed. "Why now?" Grant asked into the phone. "It's been 7 years. Powers is being considered for director. Full background check, Senate confirmation hearings. He needs to eliminate anyone who could testify about Damascus. Your former team members? 3 are already dead. Car accidents, home invasions, 1 suicide. You're number 4. The line went dead. Grant drove faster, pushing the Suburban to 80 on the dark highway. Behind him, Brad and the others followed in the second vehicle. They didn't know the full story. They didn't need to. All they needed to know was that Grant Green had enemies, and those enemies had made a fatal mistake. They'd hurt his family. The 11-hour drive became 9. Grant stopped only for gas, using cash, avoiding cameras. His mind worked through scenarios, contingencies, possibilities. If Marie was shot but Charlie was hiding, there was a chance, a slim one, that she was alive. The men searching for Charlie suggested they had orders to eliminate witnesses. All of them, which meant Powers wanted this clean. No loose ends. No one who could connect the attack back to him. That gave Grant an advantage. Powers would be careful, methodical. He'd use contractors, not official assets. Men who could be disavowed if anything went wrong. And if 9 men were waiting at Grant's house, it meant Powers expected him to come straight home, expected him to walk into a trap. Good. Grant wanted them waiting. As dawn broke over the Cascade Mountains, Grant's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. A single image. His house, photographed from across the street. 9 men visible in tactical positions around the property. Professional setup, overlapping fields of fire. Someone had military training. But the photo also showed something else. A small figure in an upstairs window. Charlie. Still alive. Still hiding. Grant's jaw clenched. He forwarded the image to Brad in the trailing vehicle, then made one more call on the flip phone. "I need a favor," he said when the line connected. "Damascus files. Everything I gave you 7 years ago. And I need it sent to every news outlet in America if I don't check in every 6 hours." The woman on the other end laughed, short and sharp. "You kept copies. Smart. I wondered when you'd use them. Insurance policy. Can you do it? Consider it done. Grant, be careful. Powers has reach. So do I." He disconnected as the Seattle skyline came into view, pink and gold in the morning light. Beautiful, peaceful, completely at odds with what was waiting for him in the suburbs. Grant pulled off the highway 3 miles from his house, parking in the lot of a shuttered construction site. The other vehicle parked beside him. 6 men climbed out, faces grim, weapons checked and ready. "Okay," Brad said quietly. "What's the play?" Grant spread a map on the hood. His neighborhood. Willowbrook Lane. His house marked with a red dot. 9 hostiles. Probably contractors. Professional. They're waiting for me to drive up, walk into the kill box. They've been there all night, which means they're tired, cold, getting sloppy. My son is still alive, hiding upstairs. My wife." He paused, forcing the emotion down, locking it away where it couldn't cloud his thinking. "Unknown status." "And the play?" Antonio repeated. Grant smiled, and it wasn't a pleasant expression. They're expecting 1 man, desperate and stupid. Instead, they're getting 7. Tim, Ron, you 2 flank from the east through the Morrison property. Brad, Stephen West approach. Use the tree line. Garrett, Antonio, you're with me. Front door. That's walking right into their trap, Garrett pointed out. The former Delta operator was the oldest of the group at 42, graying at the temples but still sharp as a blade. Exactly. They're set up for a single target. When we hit them from 3 directions simultaneously, their formation collapses. We go fast, we go hard, and we don't stop until my family is safe. And then? Brad asked. Then we find out who sent them. And we make sure they understand what happens when you threaten Grant Green's family. They moved out in the pre-dawn gray, spreading through the quiet suburban streets. Grant's heart hammered as he approached his own neighborhood, but his hands were steady. This was what he'd been trained for, what he'd done for years before Marie and Charlie. He just hoped he'd never have to do it again. 3 blocks from his house, Grant stopped. Garrett and Antonio flanked him, weapons low and ready. The street was empty, sprinklers just starting their morning cycles on perfectly manicured lawns. Normal. Peaceful. Grant's house stood at the end of the cul-de-sac, a 2-story colonial with blue shutters that Marie had picked out. The front yard had 3 men visible now, dressed as utility workers but with a rigid posture of soldiers. 2 more on the roof. 4, somewhere inside. His eyes went to the upstairs window. Charlie's room. No movement. Grant keyed his radio, voice barely a whisper. All teams, status? East position, Tim replied. 2 targets on back patio. We have them. West position, Brad confirmed. 1 in the garage, 1 in the side yard. Ready. On my mark. Grant checked his Glock one more time, then stepped into the street. Visible. Obvious. Walking straight toward his own house like a man too desperate to care about tactics. The reaction was immediate. The 3 utility workers in the front yard tensed, hands moving toward concealed weapons. One spoke into a radio. On the roof, the 2 shooters adjusted their positions, rifles tracking Grant's approach. Grant kept walking. 50 yards. 40. 30. Grant Green. The shout came from the front door. A man stepped out, tall and broad-shouldered, holding a pistol, but not aiming it yet. That's far enough. Grant stopped. 25 yards. Close enough to see the man's face clearly. Wayne Boyd, according to the DMV photo Grant had pulled during the drive. Former Navy SEAL, dishonorably discharged 3 years ago for suspected arms dealing. Now, working private contracts for the highest bidder. Where's my family? Grant asked, his voice carrying in the still morning air. Inside. Safe. For now. Boyd smiled. You walk away right now. Get in your car and drive. Maybe they stay that way. We both know that's a lie. Yeah. Boyd's smile widened. But I figured I'd offer. Makes me feel better about what comes next. What comes next, Grant said quietly, is you and your men get one chance to walk away. Drop your weapons, leave, and I'll let you live. Boyd laughed. You got balls, I'll give you that. But you're one man with a pistol, and I've got 9 shooters covering every angle of this street. You're dead before you clear leather. One man with a pistol, Grant agreed. Plus, 6 friends who are very good at their jobs. Fire teams. Execute. The morning erupted. Tim and Ron opened up from the east, suppressed rifles spitting rounds that dropped the 2 men on the back patio before they could react. Brad and Steven hit the garage and side yard simultaneously. Close-quarters combat training, turning the engagement into a brutal 3-second massacre. The shooters on the roof spun, trying to acquire new targets, but Garrett and Antonio were already moving, flanking left and right while Grant charged straight up the middle. Boyd was fast, Grant gave him that. The former SEAL had his weapon up and firing before Grant covered 5 yards. Rounds snapped past Grant's head, one tugging at his jacket. But Grant was faster. 2 rounds, center mass. Boyd stumbled back, body armor catching the impacts but stealing his breath. Grant didn't slow down. He hit Boyd like a linebacker, driving the bigger man through the open doorway and into the house. They went down hard, Grant's knee finding Boyd's solar plexus, his pistol pressing under Boyd's chin. My wife. My son. Where? Boyd gasped for air, eyes wide. Upstairs. Bedroom. Jesus. Man. Grant pistol whipped him, just hard enough to ensure unconsciousness, then was moving again. Behind him, Garrett and Antonio cleared the ground floor with practiced efficiency. Gunfire rattled from outside, as the roof shooters tried to reposition. But Tim's voice came over the radio, calm and professional. Roof clear. 2 down. Grant took the stairs 3 at a time. The upstairs hallway was dark. One door closed Charlie's room. The master bedroom door stood open. He went through low and fast, weapon tracking. Marie lay on the floor beside the bed, a makeshift tourniquet around her left thigh, her face pale but her eyes open and tracking. Alive. She'd been shot, but she'd stayed conscious long enough to tie off the wound and hide Charlie. "Grant," she whispered. "Charlie's in your closet. I told him not to come out until—" "I know. I'm here." Grant was beside her, hands checking the wound. Through and through, femoral artery missed by maybe an inch. She'd lost blood, but not enough to be critical. "Not yet. You did good, baby. You did so good." There were more of them. They searched the house, but I told Charlie to stay hidden no matter what. "I knew you'd come." Grant kissed her forehead, then moved to the closet, pushed aside the shoes and boxes. "Charlie? Buddy, it's Dad. You can come out now." A small face appeared in the darkness, tear-streaked and terrified. Charlie launched himself at Grant, small arms wrapping around his father's neck in a death grip. "I was so scared, Daddy. Mommy was bleeding, and the bad men kept looking for me, but I stayed quiet like she said, and you were so brave. So brave." Grant held his son, feeling the small body trembling against him. "It's over now. You're safe." Brad appeared in the doorway, his tactical vest spattered with blood. "Ground floor secure. 9 hostiles down, 3 dead, 6 unconscious. We've got maybe 10 minutes before someone calls the cops about the gunfire. Marie needs a hospital." Grant stood, still holding Charlie. "Brad, call it in. Anonymous tip about shots fired. Antonio, gather everything from these men, weapons, phones, IDs, everything. I want to know who hired them." "Already on it," Antonio called from downstairs. Grant handed Charlie to Brad, then turned back to Marie. Applied pressure to her wound, kept her talking, kept her focused. She'd saved their son's life by thinking clearly under impossible pressure. She'd earned every second of his attention now. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. Grant had maybe 5 minutes before this scene became a police matter, before lawyers and questions and official channels took over. 5 minutes to find out who'd ordered the hit. He found Wayne Boyd in the entryway, conscious again, coughing. Grant dragged him up by his tactical vest, slammed him against the wall. "Dwayne Powers. Where is he?" Boyd spat blood. "Man, you're already dead. You just don't know it yet. I've been dead before. Didn't take." Grant pressed his forearm across Boyd's throat. "Powers sent you. I want to know where he is, and I want to know what he paid you to kill my family. 50 grand each. Cash." Boyd's eyes were already distant, calculating odds. "And I got no idea where Powers is. We get our orders through cutouts, dead drops. That's how this works. You know that." Grant did know that, which meant Boyd was telling the truth. Contractors like him never met their employers face to face. Too much exposure. Too much risk. But Powers had made a mistake. He'd assumed Grant would die in the ambush. Assumed there'd be no one left to ask questions. "Tell Powers something for me," Grant said, releasing Boyd as police cars screeched to a stop outside. "Tell him I'm coming. Tell him to run as far and as fast as he can. Because I'm going to find him. And when I do, he's going to wish he'd killed me 7 years ago in Damascus." Boyd smiled through bloody teeth. "You really think you can touch him? Man's got the entire agency behind him. You're a ghost. A retired operator, with no friends, no resources. You're nothing." "I'm a father," Grant said quietly, "whose family you tried to kill. That makes me the most dangerous thing Powers will ever face." The police came through the door 30 seconds later, weapons drawn, shouting orders. Grant set his Glock on the floor, hands raised, as paramedics rushed past him toward Marie and Charlie. He'd answer their questions, cooperate fully, play the shocked husband and father. The narrative was simple. Armed men broke into his house, shot his wife, and he'd arrived just in time with his training team to stop them. Self-defense, defense of others. The contractors were carrying illegal weapons, had criminal records. Open and shut. But as they led him outside in handcuffs, standard procedure, they assured him Grant caught Antonio's eye. Antonio nodded once. He'd gotten what they needed. Phones, IDs, everything. The police would get their investigation. The media would get their story. And Grant Green would get his revenge. 48 hours later, Grant sat in a hospital chair beside Marie's bed, watching her sleep. The bullet wound had required surgery, but she'd recover fully. Charlie was down the hall with Marie's sister, probably being fed too much ice cream and watching cartoons, the trauma slowly beginning to recede under the cushion of family and safety. The police had released Grant after 24 hours of questioning. Self-defense, just as he'd predicted. The 6 contractors who'd survived were facing weapons charges, attempted murder, conspiracy, but they weren't talking. Professional to the end, Boyd had made bail within 12 hours. Despite attempted murder charges, Grant wasn't surprised. Powers had deep pockets and deeper connections. What had surprised him was the visitor who appeared in the hospital room doorway just after midnight. Caroline Connolly hadn't aged well. The former congressional investigator looked a decade older than her 45 years. Her blonde hair shot through with gray, lines of stress carved deep around her eyes. She'd been the one leading the Damascus investigation 7 years ago. The one who'd promised Grant that justice would be served. She'd been wrong. Grant. Her voice was soft, apologetic. I heard about your family. I'm so sorry. Are you? Grant didn't stand, didn't smile. Because last I checked, you're the one who buried the Damascus evidence. You're the one who let Powers walk. I didn't have a choice. Caroline stepped into the room, closing the door behind her. They gave me a choice. Drop the investigation or lose everything. My career, my reputation, possibly my life. I chose to live. My wife almost didn't get that choice. Caroline flinched. I know. And I know you have every reason to hate me. But I'm here because Powers is making a mistake. A big one. And I think we can use it. Grant's attention sharpened. I'm listening. Powers got sloppy. The hit on your family was supposed to look like a home invasion. Random violence. But he used contractors with known intelligence connections, and now the FBI is asking questions. They're looking into the Damascus connection, into Powers' background. If we give them the right evidence at the right time, the evidence you buried 7 years ago, the evidence I hid. Caroline pulled a flash drive from her pocket. Everything you gave me. Financial records, communications, logs, witness statements. I kept copies. Insurance policy, in case Powers ever came for me. Now I'm giving them to you. Grant took the drive, turned it over in his fingers. Why now? Why help me? Because Powers is being confirmed as director next month. Once he has that position, he's untouchable. This is our last chance to stop him. Caroline's eyes met his. And because what he did to your family, that's on me. I should have stopped him 7 years ago. Let me help you stop him now. Grant stood, walked to the window. Outside, Seattle glittered in the darkness, peaceful and oblivious. Somewhere out there, Dwayne Powers was sleeping in a comfortable bed, secure in the belief that he'd eliminated the last threat to his career. The FBI investigation, Grant said. How long before they connect Powers to the hit on my family? Without evidence? Never. Powers covered his tracks. The contractors were hired through multiple cutouts, payments made in cryptocurrency. By the time the FBI untangles the web, Powers will be director and the investigation will quietly disappear. Then, we don't wait for the FBI. Grant turned back to Caroline. We make Powers come to us. How? Grant smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. Damascus was about arms, trafficking. Powers and his network were selling American weapons to foreign buyers. The evidence you buried showed millions in illegal transactions. What if there was one more transaction? One last deal that Powers couldn't resist? Caroline's eyes widened. You want to bait him. I want to trap him. Put him in a position where he has to act, has to expose himself. And when he does, we'll be waiting with cameras, witnesses, and enough evidence to bury him so deep he'll never see daylight again. That's insane. Powers has resources. Protection. You're talking about going up against the CIA. Not the CIA. One corrupt deputy director. There's a difference. Grant pulled out his phone, began typing. I've got 6 trained operators who owe me their lives. I've got evidence that can destroy Powers. And I've got a very personal motivation to see this through. Powers made a mistake when he came after my family. Now I'm going to make sure he pays for it. Caroline was quiet for a long moment. Then she nodded. What do you need? access to the dark web arms market. Power's old contacts, the ones he used for Damascus. Can you get them? I can try. Try hard. Grant looked at Marie, still sleeping peacefully despite everything. Because this ends one of two ways. Either Powers goes down, or I do, and I'm not leaving my family unprotected ever again. Caroline left with a promise to have the information within 72 hours. Grant returned to his vigil beside Marie's bed, mind already working through the details of what came next. Dwayne Powers thought he was untouchable, thought his position and connections made him invincible. He'd built a career on corruption and violence, and now he was on the verge of reaching the highest level of American intelligence. But he'd made one critical error. He'd left witnesses alive, and Grant Green was very good at making people pay for their mistakes. The plan took shape over the next week. Marie was released from the hospital, and Grant moved his family to a safe house, a cabin in the mountains, owned by one of Antonio's former Marine contacts. Charlie didn't understand why they couldn't go home, but Marie's sister came along to help, and slowly the fear began to fade from his son's eyes. Grant spent the days at the cabin with his family, playing the dutiful husband and father. But the nights belonged to preparation. Caroline delivered as promised. Power's old contact in the arms market, a Russian named Alexei Volkov, was still active, still dealing in American weapons. And according to Caroline's intelligence, Powers had reached out to Volkov twice in the past month, looking to make new connections, build new revenue streams. The Damascus network might have been exposed, but Powers couldn't resist the profit. Grant crafted the bait carefully. A message to Volkov through encrypted channels, offering something Powers couldn't ignore: a cache of Javelin anti-tank missiles stolen from a shipment bound for Ukraine. Street value: $12 million. The kind of weapons that could shift the balance in any regional conflict. The kind of weapons Powers would kill to acquire. Volkov took the bait within 48 hours, responding through the dark web with interest and skepticism. Grant played it cool, providing just enough detail to seem legitimate. Serial numbers from real missiles. Shipping manifests. Photos of the weapons cache actually taken at a military base in Arizona where Grant still had friends. The negotiation took 3 days. Finally, Volkov agreed to a neutral ground. Inspection of the merchandise before payment. Standard procedure for this level of transaction. And he'd be bringing his American partner, the man who'd worked with him on the Damascus deal, the man who could verify the missiles were legitimate military hardware. Dwayne Powers. Grant set the meeting for an abandoned industrial complex outside Tacoma, a sprawling maze of rusted warehouses and forgotten machinery. He'd scouted the location personally, mapping every entrance and exit, every sightline and hiding spot. Then he'd planted cameras, microphones, enough surveillance equipment to record every word, every transaction. And he'd brought in his team. Brad, Tim, Antonio, Ron, Steven, and Garrett spent 2 days prepping the site, turning the warehouse into a carefully constructed trap. Sniper positions on the surrounding rooftops, fallback routes if things went wrong, emergency extraction points. You sure about this? Garrett asked as they ran through the final checklist. Powers comes here. He's going to bring serious backup. We could be looking at 20, 30 armed contractors. Let him bring an army, Grant said. We're not here to fight. We're here to get Powers on camera, making an illegal arms deal. Once we have that, we take it to the FBI, the media, Congress. Even his connections won't save him from that kind of exposure. And if he doesn't show? Brad asked. If he sends someone else? He'll show. Grant checked his weapon, a Sig Sauer P226 he'd carried in the old days. Powers can't resist this. $12 million in profit, plus the chance to permanently secure his relationship with Volkov. He'll want to be there personally, and his ego won't let him believe I'm a threat. He tried to kill your family, Antonio pointed out. Seems like he considers you a threat. He considers me a loose end, someone to be eliminated and forgotten. But I'm supposed to be dead right now, or at least too broken to fight back. Powers doesn't know I'm the one setting this up. As far as he knows, this is just another deal from Volkov's network. Steven frowned. And when he realizes it's a trap, Grant smiled coldly. That's when things get interesting. The meeting was set for midnight. Grant arrived at the warehouse at 11, dressed in tactical gear and carrying the kind of hardware that screamed private military contractor. Brad and Garrett backed him up, playing the role of hired muscle. The rest of the team was positioned around the perimeter, invisible but ready. The missiles were already in place, or at least very convincing replicas. Grant had learned a lot about weapons manufacturing in his intelligence days. Enough to create mock-ups that would pass initial inspection. At 11:45, headlights appeared in the distance. A convoy of 3 black SUVs, moving slowly through the industrial wasteland. They parked 50 yards from the warehouse entrance, and men began emerging. 8 in total, all armed, all moving with military precision. Then Volkov stepped out of the center vehicle. Tall, broad-shouldered, with a thick beard and eyes like chips of ice. He scanned the warehouse, one hand on the pistol at his hip. "You are early," Volkov called out, his Russian accent thick. "I like punctuality. It shows respect." "Respect is earned," Grant replied, his voice distorted by the voice modulator he wore. In the darkness and tactical gear, he was unrecognizable. "You have the payment?" "Payment comes after inspection. You understand." "Of course." Volkov gestured, and 2 of his men moved forward with equipment. Geiger counters, metal scanners, the tools needed to verify the missiles were real. Grant let them work, watching the perimeter for the person who really mattered. Where was Powers? Then the 4th SUV arrived. Alone, moving faster than the others, pulling up directly in front of the warehouse. Dwayne Powers stepped out. He'd aged since Grant last saw him. The former mid-level CIA officer was now graying at the temples, wearing an expensive suit under a long coat. He looked every inch the senior government official, except for the tactical vest visible when the coat shifted. "Volkov," Powers said, shaking the Russian's hand. "Good to see you again. And you, my friend. Your timing is impeccable, as always." Powers smiled. "I was in the area. Thought I'd verify the shipment personally. Can't be too careful these days." His eyes scanned the warehouse, sharp and calculating. "Who's the seller?" "New contact. Calls himself Briggs." Volkov gestured to Grant. "Comes highly recommended." Powers approached, and for a moment Grant tensed, wondering if somehow Powers would recognize him despite the darkness and disguise. But Powers' attention was on the missiles, on the potential profit. "These are military-grade javelins," Powers said, running a hand along one of the mock-ups. "Stolen from a Ukrainian shipment?" "Diverted," Grant corrected, keeping his voice distorted. "The paperwork says they arrived in Kiev. No one will look for them." "Clever." Powers smiled. "And the price?" $12 million. Non-negotiable. Everything's negotiable. Powers pulled out his phone, began photographing the missiles. Grant tensed. This was the moment. Once Powers had evidence linking him to the deal, the trap would spring. But then, Powers paused, looked closer at one of the missiles. His smile faded. "These serial numbers," Powers said slowly. "They're sequential. Military shipments don't use sequential serials. They randomize to prevent exactly this kind of theft." Grant's hand drifted toward his weapon. "Manufacturing error. Happens sometimes." "No," Powers said, his voice hardening. "It doesn't." He turned to Volkov. "This is a setup." The warehouse exploded into motion. Powers' men drew weapons. Volkov's soldiers did the same, and Grant's team opened fire from the shadows. The carefully planned ambush turned into chaos in seconds. Bullets sparked off metal, shattered concrete. Powers dove behind an SUV as Garrett's sniper rifle barked from the rooftop, dropping 2 of Volkov's men before they could bring their weapons to bear. Brad and Tim moved in from the flanks, suppressed rifles clearing threats with surgical precision. Antonio and Steven emerged from concealment, driving Powers' contractors back toward their vehicles. Grant charged straight for Powers. The deputy director was fast, bringing up a compact pistol and squeezing off 3 rounds that whistled past Grant's head. But Grant was faster. He slammed into Powers, driving the older man against the SUV, his forearm across Powers' throat. "Remember me?" Grant ripped off the voice modulator, letting Powers see his face. Recognition hit Powers like a physical blow. "Green. Impossible. You should be dead, like my wife almost was, like my son would have been if your contractors had found him." Grant pressed harder, watching Powers' face turn red. "You made a mistake coming here, Dwayne. You should have stayed in your comfortable office, hiding behind your lawyers and connections." Powers gasped for air, his hands scrambling at Grant's arm. Around them, the gunfight was winding down. Grant's team had the superior position, superior training. Volkov's men were retreating, leaving their vehicles behind. Powers' contractors were dead or surrendered. "You can't touch me," Powers wheezed. "I'm about to be director. Kill me, and you'll have the entire agency hunting you." "Who said anything about killing you?" Grant pulled Powers away from the SUV, forced him to his knees. "I'm going to do something much worse. I'm going to expose you." He gestured, and Caroline Connolly stepped out of the shadows, a camera in her hands. She'd been recording everything. Powers arriving at an illegal arms deal. Powers inspecting stolen weapons. Powers confirming his relationship with a known international arms dealer. "Hello, Dwayne," Caroline said coldly. "Remember me? The investigator you threatened 7 years ago? I've been waiting a long time for this." Powers' face went white. "That footage means nothing. I can explain." "Explain to Congress?" Grant pulled out the flash drive Caroline had given him, held it up. "This is everything from Damascus. Financial records, communications, witness testimony. And now we have you on camera, making a new deal. How many senators do you think will vote to confirm you as director when they see this?" Powers was silent, his mind visibly racing through options. Fight, flight, negotiation. But every path led to the same conclusion. He was finished. "What do you want?" Powers finally asked, his voice hollow. "Justice," Grant said simply. "You're going to resign, effective immediately. You're going to confess to your role in the Damascus operation, provide testimony against your co-conspirators. And you're going to spend the rest of your miserable life in prison, thinking about all the people you hurt. And if I refuse?" Grant smiled. "Then this footage goes public tomorrow, along with the Damascus files. You'll be arrested, tried, convicted. And unlike a resignation and cooperation deal, you won't get any leniency. You'll die in a federal prison, remembered not as a dedicated public servant but as a traitor who sold American weapons for personal profit." Powers looked around the warehouse, at the bodies of his contractors, at Volkov's abandoned vehicles, at Caroline's camera, still recording, at Grant's team, weapons trained on him with unwavering focus. "You planned all of this," Powers said, a note of admiration creeping into his voice despite himself. "The attack on my family, surviving the ambush, setting up this meet. You've been playing me from the beginning." "No," Grant corrected. "You played yourself. You came after my family. That was your mistake. Everything after that? That was just me making you pay for it." Powers closed his eyes. For a long moment, the warehouse was silent except for the distant wail of approaching sirens called by Caroline as soon as Powers had arrived. "I resign," Powers said finally, the words like pulling teeth. "I'll cooperate, just keep my family out of this." "Your family?" Grant's voice turned to ice. "Your family wasn't 6 years old, hiding in a closet while gunmen searched for him. Your family wasn't shot and bleeding out on the floor. You don't get to invoke family. Not to me." The FBI arrived 5 minutes later, followed by agents from the DOJ and congressional investigators Caroline had contacted. They found Dwayne Powers on his knees, surrounded by evidence of an attempted illegal arms deal, with Caroline Connolly's camera footage documenting everything. They found Grant Green standing over him, a man who protected his family and exposed a traitor using nothing but intelligence, planning, and the loyalty of 6 men who believed in him. The story hit the national news within hours. Deputy Director of Operations arrested at illegal arms deal. Links to Syria scandal from 7 years ago. Congressional hearings announced. Powers' confirmation as director canceled immediately. The full scope of the Damascus operation came out over the following weeks. Financial records showing over $40 million in illegal transactions. Emails documenting Powers' coordination with international arms dealers. Testimony from the surviving contractors who'd attacked Grant's family, suddenly very willing to cooperate in exchange for reduced sentences. Dwayne Powers was formally charged with conspiracy, arms trafficking, attempted murder, and a dozen other federal crimes. His lawyers fought hard, but the evidence was overwhelming. The trial lasted 3 months. The verdict took the jury 4 hours. Guilty on all counts. Sentencing came on a cold day in March. Grant sat in the courtroom gallery, Marie beside him, her hand in his. Charlie was at school, blissfully unaware of the legal proceedings that had consumed his father's life for months. The judge gave Powers 45 years in federal prison. No parole. At 62 years old, it was effectively a life sentence. As the marshals led Powers away, the former deputy director looked back one last time. His eyes found Grant's across the courtroom. No words were exchanged. None were needed. Grant had promised Powers would pay. And Grant Green always kept his promises. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed, shouting questions. How did you uncover the conspiracy? Were you working with the FBI? What's next for you? Grant ignored them all, walking to his truck with Marie. They drove in silence for a while, heading back toward their new house, a different neighborhood, a fresh start, security system good enough to make the Secret Service jealous. Is it over? Marie finally asked. Grant thought about that. Powers was in prison. His network was exposed and dismantled. The contractors who'd attacked his family were serving sentences of their own. Caroline Connolly had been vindicated, her career resurrected. The Damascus investigation had been reopened, leading to additional arrests. Yeah, Grant said. It's over. And now? Now, we go home. I pick up Charlie from school. We have dinner. Maybe watch a movie. Be a normal family. Marie smiled, squeezed his hand. I'd like that. Grant pulled into their driveway as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. Charlie burst out the front door. Marie's sister had picked him up and ran to his father, already chattering about his day at school. Grant scooped up his son, held him close, and felt something loosen in his chest. The darkness he'd carried since that phone call, since hearing his son scream in terror, finally began to recede. He'd done what needed to be done, protected his family, brought a traitor to justice. And along the way, he'd proven something important. You could leave the shadows behind. You could build a normal life. But when someone threatened the people you loved, you did whatever it took to keep them safe. Even if it meant becoming the monster one more time. Grant Green carried Charlie inside, Marie following close behind, and closed the door on the past. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new worries. But tonight, his family was safe, his enemies were defeated, and justice had been served. And for a man who'd spent years fighting in the darkness, that was more than enough. That was everything.
This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your precious time. If you enjoyed this story, then please make sure you subscribe to this channel. That would help me a lot. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.